Straight ahead, unacceptable and abysmal. Those words from the federal government talking trash about DPW and its failure to comply with its consent decree to close the dump. Minnie Fothergill has that story.
And Gene Hudson reports tonight that it seems the AG is threatening to take action as GPSS employees continue to be shortchanged.
Plus, we'll have our weekly feature saluting our armed forces. Clint Rigel with this week's Touching Bases report.
KUAM News Primetime begins now.
Half a day and good evening, everyone. If you're joining us on air, online, or on demand, we thank you as always for tuning in. Alongside Sabrina Salas-Matanani, I'm Jason Salas.
The Government of Guam's failure to comply with a consent decree for the closure of the Ordot Dump and the opening of a new landfill was a topic of a status conference in the district court this morning.
And it's now apparent that both sides have a different story on what's taking so long to close the dump. Minnie Fothergill has tonight's top story.
Unacceptable, abysmal, a chronic failure. Those are just a few of the words the federal government used to describe the Government of Guam's compliance with the consent decree to close the Ordot Dump and open a new landfill. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Schwab and Assistant U.S. Attorney Rob Mullaney, participating telephonically, expressed their frustration to the court today, saying they've reached the end of our ropes as the government has not been able to comply at all with the consent decree.
It is a consent decree with the entire government. It's not just one agency. So I think some of the things that we heard in the hearing have to do with DPW saying, well, we're having trouble with this other agency, or we're waiting for something to be done by someone else. And I think that is probably not going to be an acceptable reason for not closing Ordot Dump and opening up a sanitary landfill.
The feds informing the court today that the October 2007 deadline for the closure of the dump now seems impossible, as the agency has not been putting together the building blocks to get funding. That particular issue was also noted in a management audit conducted by Georgetown Consulting Group that listed numerous failures on DPW's part, from failing to adequately collect from residential and commercial customers to a lack of leadership and prioritizing the consent decree. The feds telling the judge, we don't want to hear another 20 years of excuses, as the problems can't be ignored anymore.
It's not a matter of time and money. It's a matter of institutional structure, will, prioritizing, getting the skilled and talented people that need to get this done with the proper resources allocated properly.
Public Works Director Larry Perez, however, contends the agency has been making progress despite a different picture painted by the feds today.
We've aggressively, if not exponentially, expedited a lot of the processes, so it's all been productive. It's all been a lot of activity, dynamics, thousands of man hours, millions of dollars spent, and we're still heading down the same path to close it at a compressed time frame.
DPW's legal counsel, Assistant Attorney General Helen Kennedy, admitted it would be impossible to meet the October 2007 deadline, saying even if a contract were entered into today, the dump wouldn't be completed for at least another 3 years. Governor's legal counsel Ray Haddock had a different opinion, saying DPW is currently looking into a public-private partnership that could result in the closure of Ordot in 6 months. But DPW Director Larry Perez admits that plan isn't set in stone.
Our fiduciary role is to ensure that, for one, they are a financially stable company, they are legitimate, they're not a fly-by-night company, and what they represent, they will deliver, and if they don't, there will be sanctions against them.
As for compliance with the consent decree to make the closure of Ordot a reality, Perez says there's not just one solution, as there are many components.
There's technical assistance, there's financial assistance, there's regulatory assistance, there's legal assistance. So there's different categories, different disciplines that are needed, and it's not just one magical answer other than give me $1 trillion and I'll build it, no problem. Obviously, financial resources is the single biggest impediment to our process.
While the Government of Guam will request yet another extension to come into compliance, the feds aren't so optimistic that the government will comply with those as well. Attorney Mullaney expressing to the court he doesn't believe that any new agreement made by the government will be worth the paper it's written on.
We've tried the less extreme approaches, and what we're telling the court today is the less extreme approaches, which is to work with the parties and have them tell us what dates they need and how to do things, which is how this consent decree was fashioned. The question now is, why can't you follow your own time schedules and set your own priorities and get this done?
DPW, as we reported, had already accrued more than $500,000 in penalties to date for its continued failure to meet the mandates of its consent decree. Reporting for Guam's News Network, I'm Mindy Fothergill.
Mindy, thank you for that report. Now, counselors for both the local and federal governments have until the end of January to file their request for extended deadlines and proposed solutions. A hearing on the motion has been slated for March 8th at 9 a.m.
Jason, many of the concerns raised during this morning's status hearing on the Ordot Dump stem from the Georgetown Consulting Group's management audit of Public Works. The audit found there is compelling and convincing evidence that DPW is not prepared to assume financial responsibilities which would be imposed upon the agency by the proposed $90 million revenue bond financing needed to fund compliance with the consent decree to close the dump.
Additionally, the audit found the DPW does not have adequate resources and the agency's current billing and collection systems are unable to handle current rate revenues, much less any additional burdens from bonds. The audit came at the request of the Public Utilities Commission, of which Chairman Terry Brooks tells KUAM they want to see DPW's collections as high as possible to prevent passing those costs to consumers ultimately. Brooks described current collections as being, quote, abysmal. To view the Georgetown Consulting Group audit in its entirety, log on to our website at KUAM.com.